get everyone to quiet down. Or you
Wait
can.
till get everyone to quiet down.
Oh, if you want. Okay.
I don't need to.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Everyone, if you could please take a seat. Am I talking loudly enough?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to begin the speeches now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just first of all want to thank all of you for coming to celebrate my dad. Sorry. We decided to have this in Canada because we felt that all his friends and family in Canada should be able to participate in celebrating him. And we were fortunate enough to have a lot of people who said to us, wherever you have it, we'll come. And so we also have people coming, family from Germany. We have family from Delaware and friends, close friends from Iowa, Michigan, New Mexico, and also Oregon. If I've missed anybody's, please speak up. Also, and we are from Northern Virginia and New Jersey. So welcome, everybody. So I'm going to talk about Dad as a father and try to keep it together. Dad was a very kind and loving father and grandfather. He made us feel very safe and secure as children. He had a strong moral compass, and he led and inspired by example. But he also listened to us, even when we were young children. When the family wanted to get our ears pierced when we were little, we told him we were scared of the pain, and he told them no ear piercing. Of course, they waited until his business trip to Egypt, and then quickly got it done before his return. When we were in elementary school, we told him we didn't want him to smoke, and he listened. Living at home, we always had discussions about various topics, and he knew so much about the world. But he also respected our opinions. We had music in our house every day, and not just Elvis. He took us to our first concerts. He took us to The Temptations, Tom Jones, Ray Charles, Tina Turner. We had writers from all over the world coming for dinner, drinks, and sometimes dancing, and they loved being there. Regarding our studies, he didn't prioritize majors that yielded a higher income. He told us we could study whatever we wanted, as long as we had a passion for it. And if we needed money, he would help us. He never judged people based on race, religion, caste, or class. He wanted people to succeed, and he did his best to help them. He was an honest, supportive, and kind man. He loved Iowa City because he was able to do what he loved most: teaching, writing, interacting with people of various backgrounds and experiences. He said he would continue teaching as long as he felt the classes inspired his students. He retired at the age of 81. When Randy and I had our sons, Mom and Dad came to see them every winter and summer. And they were hyper little boys. So he taught them how to meditate. And he gave them the mantra, "I'm a good boy." He played basketball with them, though he had no idea how to play basketball. They named him Rookie of the Year. He even sacrificed home-cooked meals to have Mom help me with Aiden until he was 6 months old. That was Mom's and his idea. He couldn't cook, but somehow he managed. He insisted on contributing to their college education. His face lit up whenever his grandsons entered the room until his last days. He never lost sight of what was important in his life. I will never meet anyone like him again. And I feel very lucky to have had him around for as long as we did. I love you. I miss you. Rest in peace, Dad. My sister Monique is next.
Okay, this is a tough one, but so when I thought about making this speech, I kept on thinking, okay, I know where I'm going to start it, and I know what I'm going to do to end it, but I just haven't quite figured out that centerpiece. I'll come along. I'll figure it out. So then, something happened yesterday, and it just changed the speech. It just changed where I was going to start, and let me tell you about it. We decided to take a little break from everything and go downtown and go to the aquarium. And we went with Rachel and Tristan and and Steve, and it was Patrick and Grayson and me. And when we finished at the aquarium, we're like, okay, we're just gonna call a lift to get back. So I put it in, and they gave me the lift that was the regular lift, or you could do the expedited lift and get someone else, or you could do the slower, like the later lift and have a reduced price or whatever. So I just clicked like the regular lift. And I'm waiting for the driver to pop up. And the driver popped up, and his name was Elvis. And I'm looking at this like, seriously? And I showed it to Steve and to Patrick, and they were laughing like, oh my God. So we're waiting, and the driver pulled up, but we couldn't see where he was, right? And you get that warning, 3 minutes, and he's leaving. And we're like, oh no, I'm trying to call him, and so on. And I'm like, I cannot miss this lift. We have to get in the car with Elvis. And so he waited for us. We found him. We got in the car. So I told him, you've already made us so happy. And I told him why. And he laughed, and he said, I told him, I brought Dad teaching the class. I said, here's this man he was from Africa, he was from Uganda, and he was Indian, and so on. He's teaching the music of Elvis Presley, which is so American. And this guy said he was from Nigeria. And I said, so your parents must have loved Elvis too? And he said they did. They loved Elvis. And then he said, normally when he does his Lyft drives, he doesn't come to that part of Toronto. It's too crowded, hard to get a parking spot, hard to find your fares, and he normally clicks reject, lets it go to someone else. But he said there was a spirit in him that was telling him he had to pick up these people. So we enjoyed the ride. We talked about music. We talked about Africa. He told us he had lived previously in Texas. That's where my nephews were born. He told us about living in America versus living in Canada. We even talked about politics. It was the kind of ride my dad would have loved. And when Elvis dropped us off, I said to him, you're getting a big tip, which is something else my dad would have done. So that changed everything, because I felt like that's the spirit of Dad, Maybe it's karma, maybe it's some kind of intervention, but that's Dad. Now, each of you, I hope, got a card. If you can take that out. If you didn't get a card, raise your hand and somebody will get you one. Did anybody not get? Oh, you didn't get a card. Can you give?
Who didn't get a card?
Janine didn't get a card. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So when we wanted to get a card for Dad, we wanted to make sure that it had pictures of it from different parts of his life, because people knew him from different parts of his life. And then we thought about what to write on it. As you know, my dad was a man of many words. And we knew it would take many words to capture who he was. So after I started writing the first part of it, he was a Goan, he was an African, he was an Iowan, he was a son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, a mentor. I thought, he was different things to so many different people. Let me ask others to give me the words to describe him. So the lines there were written by my mother, the next line my sister, and then me. The next 3 lines are from his grandsons, each line. The next 2 from his sons-in-law. The next 3 from his siblings. And each of those will tell you what he was to so many people. And when I finished it with immensely loved and forever missed, it could have been forever loved and immensely missed, because both are true. So let me tell you a little bit about our childhood. And let me first say, when I said my dad was a man of many words, I am my father's daughter. So be prepared. I had a really happy childhood. And I don't remember ever wanting for anything or looking for anything. I just remember always being happy. And it's amazing now when I look back at all the things my parents had to deal with. They left everything behind and moved to the US, where Dad had a fellowship to Yale and then a fellowship to Iowa. Now, while a fellowship to Yale and Iowa is very, very prestigious, it is not very, very lucrative. But somehow they made that money stretch. Dad started teaching. We had an apartment in Iowa, eventually a modest house. But I can tell you something that I noticed. All my friends wanted to come over to my place. They all wanted to hang out at my place. And they were all so happy to do it. Years later, one of them told me, we were always envious of the relationship you had with your parents. Like, we didn't have that with our parents, but we could see that closeness. And somehow, Dad would get into conversations with them. He would encourage them. Mom sometimes scared them, but they got around that. And Dad was just always supportive. And for me, he was supportive of so many things that I would do. I lived at home in college. And some people why would you want to live at home in college? Wouldn't you want to get out, live on your own? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to owe money when I get out of college. Someone else is cooking my food. Someone else is doing my laundry. And my dad, every Sunday as I was sleeping in after going dancing the night before, he would take my car, he'd get it washed, he'd fill it up with gas, and then he would go to Prairie Lights bookstore to pick up his copy of the Sunday New York Times. He did that every Sunday. So I had it pretty good. And as for careers, as my sister said, he was always very supportive of what we wanted to do. He didn't care about the financial part of it or anything like that. He always wanted us to be passionate. That's what he looked for, passion. And even today, as I'm in journalism, I tell people I was raised by news junkies. Of course I was going to get into journalism. And it helped, it made him feel so good that that's the direction that I decided to go with. So supportive, that was one of my words, supportive, because that's what he was. He was also very kind. He was kind and generous to everybody. Oddly enough, when among them people I heard from, when I posted that he had passed, was an ex-boyfriend of mine. And he wrote there, he was a lovely man and very kind to me. And Dad was kind to everybody. I mean, I remember he couldn't bear to, like, if we had an insect in the house, he couldn't bear to kill the insect, where the insect had the right to life. So he'd spend all this time trying to scoop it up and get it out of the house, open the door, throw it out, and 2 more flies would come in. He couldn't bear to see an animal suffer. When I had a cat, Keisha, and she'd come running over to me in the kitchen, and he'd say, what is it? What does she want? And I said, well, she heard me open up a can of tuna, and she wants the water. Give her the water. He couldn't stand to see her wanting something that she couldn't get. And as Kathy mentioned, he was that way with us too. When I was living at home and the doorbell would ring and he'd go to answer it, Mom would say, oh God, it's gonna be a salesperson and your dad's just gonna buy whatever they have. Or it's somebody political looking for some money and he's going to give it to them. And they would get like solicitations from people who are running for a small office in another state or a different state. And how is Dad on all these lists? Well, of course, because he was that kind of generous person. If somebody was on the side of the street, he'd pull over. He'd want to give him money. He'd want to do something, even though Mom was there saying, oh God, don't pull on the side of the street to do this. But that's who he was. He was very loving. He would always console you if you were feeling, if you were feeling upset about something or sad. Even when these last few years, he was not quite himself. That was so core to who he was. He kept that. When we lost our cat suddenly a year and a half ago, and we were all brokenhearted, he kept saying to Mom, call them, see how they're doing. Check in with them. Because he knew we were in pain. And that's what he was. He was loving to everybody. And Dad was very positive and optimistic. He believed in the power of positive thinking. He wouldn't dwell on things. He believed in the goodness of people. So even when things looked dark, he would still believe they could be turned around. Unfortunately, that extended to medical stuff, where he's like, I don't need to go to a doctor, because I believe in positive thinking, and if I go to the doctor, he'll tell me something negative. We always found that strange, since both his sons-in-law are doctors, and most of his best friends in college were doctors. And we were like, Dad, you gotta see a doctor. No. He'll tell me something bad, and then it's a slippery slope. But that idea of always looking for the best in people means he also brought out the best in people. And lastly, I want to leave you with a story. When I was in Washington, D.C., I worked for a show, the Diane Rehm Show. And there was a local show out of Washington, D.C., out of WAMU, and it was hosted by a man named Kojo Nnamdi. And Kojo was from the Caribbean. And Dad taught Caribbean literature. And he loved the literature of the Caribbean people. And I introduced Dad to Kojo, and the two of them started talking like they were old friends. They had people in common, they read the same authors, they had things to talk about. They got along great. So Kojo and Dad decided they should go out for lunch. So I brought Dad to the office, and the two of them went out for lunch, and they were gone for 2.5 hours or something like that. And when they came back, both of them were, they had a great time, and Kojo said, oh, he could have spent so much more time talking to Dad, he thanked him, and so on. And the next day, Kojo said to me, I really enjoyed that lunch with your dad. I'm telling you, I could have spent another 5 hours with him and still not run out of things to talk about. And I went home and I told Dad, This is what Kojo said. And Dad said, "That's good. Leave them wanting more." And I have to tell you, he has left us wanting more. More of him. But I will forever be grateful that we could have lost him in COVID. He was very sick. That's how they ended up in Virginia. And we didn't lose him, and we had him for 2.5 more years. And those 2.5 more years, he was happy. He was in a new home. He was making new friends, and they were good. So thank you, Dad. You are immensely loved and forever missed. I'm going to call John to come up here.
Thanks. Now from this number of sheets I have, you know I'm going to talk a lot. Secondly, on the back you see all this Sudoku. That means I do a lot of Sudoku. Now the thing about Peter and my relationship with him is, you know, we were at both, at the same time, we were twin souls, and he was a father figure. Now, you try and figure that out. I can't, but it is a fact that very often we would think alike, and he would seek me out, and I felt I was talking to myself sometimes, you know. But then when I was in trouble, it's he I spoke to. I had girlfriend problems. He was the guy I spoke to. You know, I was doing really badly in university. He was the guy I spoke to. I thought I was going to fail, and somehow I got enough energy from that to carry on. Now, actually, a lot of my relationship starts very young. And my mother tells me that Peter, when very young, used to do a lot of fret work. I don't know if you'll understand that. That was a kind of hobby where you make things out of a saw and so on. So he had a lot of fret work, and it was one corner all over the place. There's a lot of his stuff. He made a lot of beautiful works. But the best thing is how it helped me personally. Well, you see, I was just a baby at the time and hadn't started walking yet. And apparently my Aunt Dinah loved squeezing me. Now, I did not enjoy being squeezed by women. Not at that time. It took a few more years. Yeah. So whenever I heard her voice, I quickly crawled and hid in his fretwork. And his mother and my mom knew I was there. She didn't have the heart to tell my aunt that where I was. So his fretwork saved me from a few kisses. Yeah. So Peter would have, oh no, I'll skip that. Here we are. Later on, when my parents moved to Fort Portal, Ruth and I were living with my aunt in Entebbe, and to go to primary school, because in Fort Portal there was no schools. And we would wait patiently for Peter to come from Kampala. You know, you were staying with my aunt. So he would come from Kampala on the weekends, and we wait longingly for him, and he'd spent the time with us, and we would both weep when he took off and went back. But another thing my aunt enabled Peter to do was to have this fantastic record collection, okay? And also, he had all these comics that he bought. And he had boxes of this. He spoiled him silly. So when we went to visit him, David and I had the time of our lives. we just dived into those comics and we read them. And people said, did you feel jealous? You know, he had everything. And y'all, what did y'all have? I said, are you kidding me? All those comics? We would never be able to get all those comics. So we loved it. Peter would have lived with my aunt in Kampala as a teenager so that he could go off and go to school there. And we were in Entebbe. And she would spoil him. Oh, I said a lot of those things. See, now back. Peter was a very good clarinet player. Very few people know. And in university, he used to play field hockey, badminton, cricket, table tennis for his university. He was in the teams, and especially the inter-university games. And in his spare time, he used to study. He taught for a year in St. Mary's College, where I was, and in Kololo School after his degree, before going off to do his postgraduate degree. Now, stepping back a bit, Mary was very gutsy, as you're going to find out. Mary lived in Iringa. Now, one day I realized she came to Aunt Dinah's house. She was just 2 doors away from us. And she started secretarial work in the Secretarial College on the top of Ensimisi Hill. We didn't know there was a Secretarial College at the top of Ensimisi Hill. But Mary knew. She wanted to get away from her parents, and she stayed with Auntie Dinah, you know, and she got to know us. And, you know, Peter noticed her then, but he had another girlfriend at the time. And so he couldn't do anything, but he took note. And he had a good memory. Yeah. Now, he got his chance when his friend Adolf was getting married in Dar es Salaam. So I went along. My father sent me as a chaperone to make sure he didn't get up to too much mischief. But it was good. We were staying with Mary and 2 of her friends. So Peter had a chance to get to know Mary, and, you know, the universe unfolded as it should. And so he got his second chance in Dar es Salaam. Now, when he returned from Leeds, he couldn't get work. He did his postgraduate in Leeds. He couldn't get any work in Uganda because, you know, he wanted to lecture in Makerere or something. He had been blacklisted by the British government because he was, they thought he was too progressive for his liking, and he didn't kowtow to them. So they blacklisted him everywhere. So he couldn't get work. He then got a job like any self-respecting Goan would do. They worked in the civil service. So Peter joined the civil service thanks to Alvaro Colasso, who helped him get a job there. And he really thrived in the civil service. He, in fact, did crazy things like he ran the first lottery in Uganda. Now, who would have thought, right? But he ran the first lottery in Uganda. Now, another thing he did was, well, I'll pass that for a second. One day, he was staying with us, but he decided he's going to go for his first annual general meeting at the GI. Okay? So David, Ruth, and I said, okay, don't come back as president, ha, ha, ha. You know, he was 26 years old, so he said, ha, ha, ha. And then he goes to the meeting, he comes back home, he's president. How did you do this? So he said, well, they couldn't get any presidents. Nobody was agreeing to stand. So for the sake of my father, I volunteered. So he ended up being president for 3 terms, and it helped me a bit, in fact. And it helped him in very many ways. His first novel, In a Brown Mantle, now preceded the expulsion. And some more about that later. But one of the things I remember that he had when he was working in the Ministry of Finance, the taxi driver union, or whatever you wanted to call it, they came to the Ministry of Finance and they asked them, they said, we want you all to finance us because no bank will finance us. And right now we're being financed by Indian businessmen and they're charging us a heavy rate of interest. And so the permanent secretary said, maybe we should do this. So Peter, I want you to form a team and you chair it. So Peter says to them, what's wrong with you? They're complaining about Indian businessmen and you want me to chair the meeting. So the guy said to him, well, what's wrong with that? You're one of us. So, that was a measure, and I think a lot of us could recognize that in Africa anyway, Goans were really accepted as one of them. And more so Peter than anybody else, and he epitomized that. Getting to the end. Now, personally, after my university days, I would lean on Peter as my father passed away. I had women problems, and I would go to him, and he would give me advice. And he made me, as if I didn't have enough problems, he made me sports secretary and hockey captain. So I told him, look, my girlfriend is just split up with me. And that's my future wife, by the way. She just split up with me. I don't know how I can do this. It's not a good time. He told me, this is the best time. You'll be too busy to think about it. And he was dead right, of course. And of course, Cynthia and I made up later on. And when the expulsion came, Peter left to take up a fellowship to Yale. Now, he became famous on his course on Elvis. He was interviewed on CBC, as it happens. He was invited to the University of Tel Aviv to talk about this course, because one of the things most people don't know is Elvis's grandmother was a Jew. So they invited him to the University of Tel Aviv. So he gives his talk there, and among the people who came to attend was an Elvis imitator, an Israeli Elvis imitator. Now, the thing you don't realize about this Elvis imitator, you think, oh, another Elvis imitator. This guy was a former Mossad worker, and he used to go around murdering people, Palestinians. And he got so tired of murdering people that he kicked it up and became an Elvis imitator singing Elvis songs. And he was so good that when he gave a show near the Lebanese border, Palestinians would smuggle across to listen to him. So, Elvis was a great unifier, and my brother was his big prophet. Now, we reach a point, and I'm going to tell you a little story. There was a guy, Alfred, not Alfred, who was Alfred's brother, who ran a jazz band in Makerere. Now, the Uganda television, they would invite different bands to come and play on TV. And so they played. Now, they didn't know how to stop. They came to a certain point and they kept going round and round and round. So, Alfred didn't know what to do. In desperation, he grabbed his maracas, shook them, and they all stopped. Now, I wanted to bring a set of maracas to stop right here, and I forgot them at home. So now I want all of you all to repeat after me, John, please stop. John, please stop. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm the youngest. When you're the youngest, you're entitled to be a little giddy-headed. Those that knew me when I was young would definitely know I was the stupid one. Insofar as we gave nicknames. My cousin and I, we always had a nickname for everybody. The one thing that did not change is I never stopped. Even in my older days, we had nicknames. Now, Peter also had one. Now, kind of hard to imagine when you listen to Peter talking to different kinds of people, different subjects, that he actually had a nickname. And he did, and he responded to that name. We had a gang. It was called the Sasab gang. And Peter was the head of it. Now, it's hard to imagine Peter actually being a little giddy-headed like the rest of us, but he was. He accepted the fun that I used to have in the house, the fun that I used to make of him, the fun that I used to make of everybody. And he always laughed at the names that I gave people. There's one thing that we want, I want, I can't have. And that's my brother back. We lived far apart, but the bond was always there. When I look at the pictures, I can't imagine that he's gone. All I can think of is he's still in Iowa. We'll see him the next time. And the last time that I saw him, I only had one request, and that was to be around. He couldn't fulfill that. Peter never got angry, and I'm sure many of you know that. Never saw him angry, but I did, twice. Once, when I was young and we were playing hockey, and somebody took me out on the knees. He actually quarreled with that person for doing that. And the second time, when we went to see him in Iowa, and I tried to talk to him to consider moving closer to the girls. And he told me off. But I knew that wasn't him. He just was fighting to keep his independence. I mean, the girls know that every time Peter called on Skype, he would slowly turn the computer so that he wouldn't be looking at them and they wouldn't bring up the subject about him moving. You hear a lot about Peter and his accomplishments. But the most important part is he was our brother. He was one of 4, and we've lost one. I know it's hard when we get to a certain stage in life that we've actually become old, and the next stage is to say our goodbyes. That's a given. But when it actually happens, it's very hard to accept. You look in the mirror, and what do you see? You see yourself when you were young. We may be 60, 70, 80 now, but you don't see that in the mirror. You see what you saw when you were like 15, 16-year-old, the young kids that we were around with our parents. And that's why when somebody tells you that your brother is gone, it's difficult to accept because he's not old. We are not old. Peter has accomplished a lot in his life. I wish we could, as siblings, say the same. Peter could talk your ear off. And of course, as John pointed out, they were an even match. When it came to my aunt, the one that looked after Peter, she would get her blood pressure up because John would not give up. He would keep on yakking until she turned blue. And in the end, my father would say, "Are walk her out." But that was how we came up. Each one allowed to do what they wanted to do. And I think that's what Peter did with his family. Yeah, he had the same thing about the ear piercing. And I don't know whether John was there, but I know I was. Ear piercing was a no-no. All they had to do was wait for me to go for hockey, and that was it. Lydia took Nicole, and the ears were pierced. Thank God the nose wasn't. Those were some of the very good days when we were growing up. And as we grew up, we realized that the family expanded in a good way. We became larger, but the core four of us always stayed. Whatever the other wanted, we were there. We didn't change much, right to the point where Peter is to get those comics, and we would save our pocket money to make sure we could buy a comic to give him because we knew that was the one he was reading. Same with his music. We would occasionally go up to Shankardas and buy that extra record that Peter wanted. But we did that together, the four of us. And that's what we are going to miss now. One is gone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jim Dane, and my wife Ruth and I are here. I'm very honored to be asked to speak a little bit about Peter. Peter and Mary and the Dane family have been close friends for over 50 years. Peter, Mary, Kathy, and Monique came to America when international guests were welcome, and we are certainly grateful that they eventually arrived at Iowa City and the University of Iowa, as are more than 2 generations of African literature students and students of the legacy of Elvis Presley. My brother Jack recalls that Peter and Mary accompanied my parents on a visit to see him at Shattuck School in Faribault, Minnesota in 1975. Note, that is a 5-hour-long trip on a 2-lane highway, one way, so that's 10 hours in very close quarters, but they became fast friends. When Peter and Mary first arrived in Iowa City, they lived in a small apartment in the Mayflower in Iowa City. From the get-go, they were very kind and generous people. My sister Helen related to me that she and our sister Donna went with Mom and Dad to a lovely dinner at their Mayflower apartment. Helen said it was her first and last introduction to ox brains. But Jack noted that Mary's lamb marsala changed his life. Soon, Peter, Mary, Kathy, and Monique became close family friends, and together we celebrated birthdays, weddings, graduations, and important family celebrations. We met many of you family members of both Peter and Mary, and we watched Kathy and Monique grow up, get married, start their own families, and move on to very successful careers. Mary was always helping, whether it was sewing dresses or cooking food or just being on the phone with my mom. And I remember coming in and wanting to talk to Mom, and she'd be talking to Mary, and I'd be sitting there tapping my foot. They just went on for hours, it seemed. Peter fascinated us with his stories about places he had visited and the writers and celebrities he had met. Starting in the early 1980s, Mom and Dad connected with Peter and Mary and with Paul and Walling Engel and the International Writing Program and started hosting the international writers for our Thanksgiving dinner at our Iowa farm. A 1988 article in the local Iowa City newspaper on plans for such a dinner included a picture of Mom and Dad behind a couple of turkeys that they raised that would become Thanksgiving dinner for that year's harvest dinner. In the article, of course, Mary is mentioned because she was so important to the whole process and the whole event. My dad enjoyed taking many movies of family and friends, which later involved videotaping. I'm pretty sure that we have a video of Peter from the late 90s marking the 25th anniversary of Peter and Mary arriving in Iowa City and leaving Uganda after Idi Amin came to power. I'm guessing that Dad made a copy for Peter, but if you can't find it, I hope to find it someday and we'll share it again. I was always impressed and amazed at Peter's deep fascination with Elvis Presley. I remember listening to my AM radio on my tractor to a popular news commentator, Paul Harvey, who was at the height of his popularity 20 to 30 years ago, mentioning somewhat incredulously how the University of Iowa was offering credit for Peter's course on Elvis Presley. Obviously, Paul Harvey never took the course. Peter once borrowed all my Moody Blues albums to study a remote connection between the Moody Blues and Elvis, something that totally I missed. My brother Jack shared these thoughts about Peter. Peter's life and career illustrate the weakness of the U.S. current immigration policy. Admission to the United States is now under attack, but our fortune of receiving Peter, Mary, Kathy, and Monique from Uganda, where they were a vital part of their government, to us in Iowa City was a great thing for our family and the Iowa and the United States. Peter's scholarship in African literature, his nationally recognized Elvis as anthology course, and his leadership with the Iowa International Writers Program were such a blessing to us all, enriching the lives of all who had the fortune to know Peter. The bulk of our friendship with Peter and Mary revolves around the annual harvest party, which was our opportunity for the international writers to come visit us and meet some of our farmer neighbors. I think this year will be year 45. For many years, Mary worked with the program and was instrumental in making everyone feel welcome. Peter was often the facilitator at the picnic. Mary and Peter first connected our family with Paul Engel, and then Walling, and later Chris Merrill. After a hayride for the riders around our farm, each rider would introduce themselves and discuss how they used their time in the IWP and who they had left back at home. The harvest party is best encapsulated by this poem written by Dale Hockey, a frequent guest who was from Davenport, Iowa, entitled Harvest. There is no perfect home, except maybe where you are warm and your dreams are easy. But when your world comes crashing in around you on your rider's dreams, subject to the whims of those in power, come to us. Come to Eastern Iowa, to the rolling hills of friendship, to share the harvest and harvest your dreams, and know this is your home too. This was dedicated to John and Allie Dane, Peter and Mary Nazareth, Chris Merrill, and to all the brave souls who write because they must. October 2016. And finally, at each harvest party, Peter told this story. When Peter and Mary arrived in Iowa City, they were wanting to meet some Iowa farmers, and my parents were interested in meeting them. Now, you need to note, my parents didn't understand the concept of Goa and all that all they knew is Peter and Mary came from Uganda. On the trip to their first meeting, my parents wondered out loud to each other, would they be able to communicate with two people who had come from Uganda? Little did they understand that Peter and Mary spoke English better than they did. At the same time, Peter and Mary wondered out loud to each other, would they be able to communicate to two Republicans? Our family misses Peter and will be ever grateful to how he and Mary, Kathy and Monique, and their extended family made us much better world citizens.
Thank you all. I am the aforementioned Christopher Merrill. Not long after Peter Nazareth became an American citizen, a step he did not take until Barack Obama was elected president of the United States, he showed me 6 different passports he had used over the course of his long life, beginning in Uganda, where he was born, raised, and educated at Makerere University in Kampala, and worked as a senior finance officer in the Ministry of Finance until 1973, when Idi Amin expelled the Asians from Uganda. Hence, his passports included one for stateless persons issued by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, an agency I had written about in a book titled The Old Bridge, The Third Balkan War and the Age of the Refugee. It was my reporting on the wars of succession in the former Yugoslavia that brought me to the attention of the University of Iowa, where Peter spent most of his academic career, and thus here today to help celebrate his singular life and literary achievement. I met Peter in the spring of 2000 when he was on the search committee to select a new director of the International Writing Program, or IWP. I was struck during my interviews by the depth of his knowledge, not only of world literature, academic administration, and politics, but of international relations, music, and folklore. How could I know that a casual mention of a professor I knew of American and British literature in Sarajevo, the besieged capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, liked to close his weekly radio show of country and Western music by playing Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel? How could I know that this would trigger a fascinating disquisition on how the song defined rock and roll in its earliest days, and thus shaped the writings not only of Peter, but of countless IWP writers he had tutored, writers from, well, everywhere. Hired to rebuild this storied institution, which had fallen on hard times after its co-founders and co-directors had retired, I soon learned that Peter and Mary were integral to any hope of success I might entertain of restoring the IWP to its former grandeur. For their institutional knowledge was unsurpassed, and in their service to the mission of the IWP to connect the writers of the world, they had acquired extraordinary diplomatic skills. They were the most gracious hosts anyone could imagine. Every fall, Peter would give the visiting writers books to read, records and CDs to listen to, and advice about all manner of things literary and social, while Mary ministered to their daily needs, accompanied them to doctors' and dentists' appointments or the emergency room, cooked meals for them, and heard their stories. I repeatedly asked Peter to consider writing a memoir about his time with the IWP, but he maintained an admirable level of discretion. You can imagine what antics a program that brings 25 to 30 writers together for 3 months, including a trio of novelists who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, might produce. But Peter refused to betray the writers he had befriended. Eventually, our in-house translator and editor, Natasha Duravicheva, hit on a scheme to get him to tell some of the stories he held in confidence, but only on the condition that we never publish them. Every few weeks, she would send him the name of a distinguished alum, and within hours, Peter would reply with 5 superb paragraphs chock full of juicy tidbits about the writer, which I would love to share with you. But a promise is a promise. And when the history of the IWP is finally written, it will record that for more than 40 years, Peter and Mary gave their hearts and souls to the care and cultivation of literary talent from every land, becoming in the process what I would call prominent citizens of the Republic of Letters, the passports to which never expire. On Fridays at noon, the IWP hosts a panel in the Iowa City Public Library, where 4 writers hold forth on subjects like the connection between literature and politics or religion, the mystery of the creative process, or why they write what they write. The presentations are usually quite interesting, and it was the custom during my tenure that Peter would ask the first question. The proceedings were televised on a cable outlet with a defined start and finish, and I was always conscious of the clock. Peter, as you know, had the gift of gab, and I would sometimes grow impatient as the preface to his questions seemed to meander ever farther afield. But there was always a point to these digressions, which was to embed the question in the history and traditions of the IWP, linking the writers to their forebears and colleagues in more than 160 countries. Call it a teaching moment, for which I am ever grateful. But his gift of gab sometimes got him into some darker waters. Not long after 9/11, someone reported him to the FBI for whatever he might have said, we are guessing, in a class. I got a phone call very early one morning to say the FBI was coming to interview him. And I reached out to our general counsel, and I was frankly nervous that Peter might talk himself into a prison stay. So what we agreed with the FBI was that though I would not be in the room with them, I would be right outside the door, maybe 4 or 5 feet, and the door would be open. So I could listen to the questioning and how it was going in case things veered in a more complicated direction. Over the next hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, Peter managed to fill this FBI agent's ear and brain, and he was a young guy with a crew cut, with all manner of ideas about world literature, Elvis Presley, rock and roll. It went on and on, so that by the end, he was writing out a list of books that this FBI agent needed to read if he wanted truly to understand America, and they let him go. Peter was quick to recognize trickster figures, perhaps because he was himself a bit of a shapeshifter, and his profound understanding of human behavior enabled him to discern issues with certain writers long before it occurred to me that trouble might be brewing. His advice in such cases was invariably on the mark, likely because he grasped better than most the precarious nature of the literary enterprise and the inherent vulnerability of writers from the so-called third world. Peter often reminded me that it was the writers who seemed unhappiest during their residency who generally had the happiest memories of their time in Iowa. He knew what was what. For example, the University of Iowa pioneered the workshop approach to a literary apprenticeship, offering advanced degrees in creative writing, in MFA, and occasionally a PhD in English or Spanish with a creative thesis. From time to time, someone from the IWP would seek such a degree, and in the early 1990s, a writer from the Caribbean turned in a novel for his dissertation, a significant portion of which was composed in Creole. The committee met before the defense, before they would bring him into the room to defend his novel. And Peter was amazed to hear from the director of the famous Iowa Writers' Workshop argue that he did not believe anyone spoke in the manner of these Creole characters. Peter said he was pretty sure the writer was in command of his materials, which made the experience of reading the book so enjoyable. The director disagreed, and then when the defense began, he asserted that nobody spoke like these characters. The writer replied for 25 minutes straight in Creole, which so angered the director that he forbade any more creative dissertations. But Peter had the last laugh. His student went on to have a fine career, continuing to write in Creole, and we have, in the last year, decided to reinstitute the creative thesis for a PhD. Peter had a knack for gently steering wayward writers toward making good decisions, not foolish ones. And I cannot count the number of times his wise counsel spared me considerable heartache. The same holds for countless IWP alumni. And so it is in the spirit of love and gratitude that we gather here to celebrate this remarkable man. Whenever I lectured abroad about the IWP, I like to say I was blessed to work with two Goans from Uganda named Peter and Mary Nazareth, which always brought a smile. What could be more improbable than a couple named after two crucially important biblical figures and the town where Jesus was raised, guiding writers toward their best selves? No more improbable than the fact that the writer of the novels, The General, is up and in a brown mantle. Such acclaimed works of scholarship as Literature and Society in Modern Africa, An African View of Literature, Edwin Thumbay, Creating a Nation Through Poetry, and Remembering Singapore, should also be an expert in Elvis Presley. And that was why we were blessed to be in his orbit. Thank you, Peter. Your words made all the difference. And I wish to conclude by reading you just a short section from a long poem I have written in his memory, titled Royal Stanzas. And the lines go like this. An honest cup of tea was what the bookshop offered its customers before the reading, featuring writers from a foreign war, which was still raging in the countryside, while car bombs regularly detonated in crowded markets in the capital and in the roundabouts of provincial towns. And yet the fighting seemed so far away to the old men and women sipping tea beside the fireplace, waiting for the writers who were around the corner in a pub, drinking beer chasers. Will you look at the time? Peter made the most of his time on earth, and I am indebted to him for the ways in which he taught me and so many others how to do the same. Thank you.
I'm Steve Ellerhoff. I am one of thousands of Peter's students. imagine. Imagine how perfect it is for all of us to come together to celebrate the life of Professor Peter Nazareth in Canada. Perfect, in part, because one of Peter's favorite novels is Flight to Canada by Ishmael Reed, who later named Peter in another novel that he wrote. This book, set during the Civil War, sees an enslaved poet on his journey to safety. Raven Quickskill, Raven, the trickster. He preferred Canada to slavery, whether Canada was exile, death, art, liberation, or a woman, each man to his own Canada. It was his writing that got him to Canada. His poem, Flight to Canada, was responsible for getting him to Canada. And so for him, freedom was his writing. His writing was his hoodoo. Others had their way of hoodoo, but his was his writing. It fascinated him, it possessed him. His typewriter was his drum he danced to. The same is true of Peter. Certainly, the gods he often spoke of have been at work, bringing us all here today, sending Elvis to pick us up yesterday. Yes, the gods, and in my case, Monique and Kathy for this flight to Canada, and John for warm hospitality. Thank you. Yes, writing was Peter's freedom, and teaching was his bread and butter. That's how I met him. The finest professor I shall ever know. Some students called him Snazzy Nazzy. I don't think he knew this. It's because he was the only faculty member who bothered to dress well. Nobody else taught wearing a Thunderbird bolo tie. In the classroom, his method was Socratic, his approach cheerful. Peter uplifted his students, encouraging us to make connections, to analyze art and life, to listen closely. The content of his groundbreaking course, Elvis as Anthology, was 20th century popular music, yes, but the praxis was listening. Nobody else taught a class like that. And what about his African literature course? He took countless students in a small landlocked state on an extensive literary tour of the African continent. He guided me through all of his friends Ngugi wa Thiong'o's novels, historicizing and contextualizing it all so that my experience of the world could both grow and recognize greater nuances. As an instructor, he gave and gave. Professor Nazareth, during office hours, was even more interesting. Off syllabus, freed to conversation, he shared a breadth of knowledge and perspective that still astonishes me. Sitting with him one-on-one felt like hanging out with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He told a funny story about his childhood, about his knack for expounding on all topics, and how when his parents had heard enough, they told him to go talk to the cook, which he did. I decided, as an undergraduate, I wanted to be the cook. Peter spoke about things no one else in my life was speaking about: consciousness, karma, dharma, trickster tactics, and all from a gentle center. He knew, and these are his words, fiction and poetry and drama have power to stretch the consciousness, to expand the imagination, to cross barriers of ethnicity, to help remove trauma, to rebuild a nation. So, while instilling an intellectual and artistic curiosity about our world, he also imparted a spiritual focus. He also modeled a life lived well, surviving grave dangers with great dignity. I wondered how. And then I met and got to know and love Mary. Aha, power couple. Truly complementary, truly in it together. Sometimes he would chide a famous writer for being married about 27 times. Presence and commitment mattered to Peter. And now I know Kathy and Monique, their families, Peter's siblings, Ruth and John and David. Aha, power family. And all who are here today, and all the mycelial network of friends and writers around the globe he and Mary befriended through the International Writing Program. Aha, power community. At one point, he tossed me into it. When I returned from living in Ireland and visited him and Mary, we attended an IWP reading. At the end, he got up and said a few words, then said I was going to get up and say a few words. This was news to me. I was unprepared, but he knew I was ready. After I spoke, very briefly, but sincerely, about how lucky Iowa was to have a program like this, bringing people from around the world to Iowa, the event broke up into about 60 different conversations, all happening at once. And the Irish writer Sarah Baum said hello to me, and we've been friends ever since. That's thanks to Peter. I once asked him how he acclimated to life in the USA himself, how he made sense of life there in a new place. He said he studied the work of Mel Blanc, Chuck Jones, and Carl Stalling, the geniuses who made the Looney Tunes. Peter said those cartoons brim with trickster techniques, that their wisdom helped him make full professor. There's too much to say by way of thanks and love for Professor Nazareth. When preparing for today, this folded sheet of paper fell out of a book. And it's the words he spoke at my honors graduation ceremony in 2002. I had been thinking about that event and what he had said, what I remembered of it. And then suddenly, here returned the very paper he read from. His words came back. He spoke about when I became his research assistant after a pipe burst in his and Mary's house, flooding it. And he said, so, I began the real new millennium with Steve Ellerhoff holding my hand. I'd forgotten he'd said that. All this time, my memory had it the other way around, that at the dawn of a new millennium, Peter Nazareth was holding my hand. And now, with his words coming back, I see we crossed a threshold together, holding each other's hand. Once a father figure, always a father figure. That's how I will always remember Peter. That and his laughter. Peter laughed so many times in my presence, I think he laughed every time I saw him, that I can still hear it. His joy. Listen, I suppose you can surely hear it too. Suppose.
We'd like to open the mic up to anybody else who'd like to come up and say a few words about Dad. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be, anything more than what he meant to you, how you feel. We'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to come up.
I hesitated to volunteer because I thought I'd get a little emotional. Actually, I didn't know Peter. I knew of him until I married Joan. And then I got to know Peter and Mary. And they came and spent time with us in London, Ontario. And he wanted to know what I was reading. And I started to tell him what I was reading and what I was doing. And I said I was very stressed being a student, so I started transcendental meditation. And I told him about the experience. And I forgot, all about it. And a few years later, I found out that he was practicing it. And I'm not sure I want to admit that I started him on that because he believed that with that he could solve all his problems, including the medical ones. And maybe that was not the best thing. But he was in Iowa, and I was trained as a corn breeder, which, as you know, is a key to Iowa. And when I was visiting one of our research stations in Washington, Iowa, I decided to drive to see Peter and Mary, and of course had a great meal and a wonderful time. And on my way back, I got a speeding ticket, which I decided not to pay. And I asked people in Iowa, I said, do you think I can get away without paying it? And they said, well, as long as you don't rent a car and get caught in Iowa again, you'll be fine. And so I still have that speeding ticket. And it's a great memory of my visit with Peter and Mary. But Peter remembered everything you said to him. I would meet him, after 8 years, and he would say something like, you remember you said that? And I would think, no, I have no idea. And he did that with, I know all of you. He remembered what you said, and he thought about it. He reflected on it. It was important to him what people thought. And the last time I met him, he was here visiting with Mary. We went to see him, and he was not well. I don't know if he had a flu or he had something. Anyway, I gave him a big hug. And he went back and he said, you have a healing hug. After that hug, I was completely okay. And when I hugged Mary today, I said, I'm giving you a healing hug. This is a power I did not know I possessed. And maybe it was very specific to Peter, but that's how I remember him. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Narona. I'm probably an unlikely person to be speaking here, but there are a few things that cross me and Peter together over time. Peter was just 10 years older than me, and I remember him getting the gold medal for being first in the Commonwealth for the Cambridge Secondary School in 1956. And then he goes on in his life. Don't know this guy at all. In 1963, I was in Form 2 in Cololo Secondary School. He happened to come and teach there for a span of time. And that's when this Elvis Cliff Richard thing was raging. Now, mind you, the Beatles hadn't arrived in North America at the time, but they were already present in other parts of the world. And there was this debate about Elvis and Cliff Richard, because back in Uganda there was the British tradition. Of course, Cliff was amplified quite a bit. But anyway, I recall Peter doing an article for our annual school magazine on Elvis. And I said, wow, okay, that's the direction I'm going to go. Mind you, my mom had put me in that direction too. So many years later, John and myself, John Nazareth and myself, we were close friends, and every time Peter and Mary, not every time, quite a few times when they came up here, we'd get into discussions, and we had really good discussions. And that's all when I also learned that, as I said earlier today to a friend, you realize true academics never get upset. They can discuss and discuss and discuss, and you cannot poke the bear there at all. But we talked about Elvis a lot. And around that time, I accidentally landed up in a band, and I was singing some songs, and Peter came out to sing a song. I said, we were singing. And I sang this particular song. It's one of the Elvis ones called One Night With You. But what I didn't realize at the time, there was a brothel version of the song called One Night of Sin. Now, I was not good at remembering words, and whatever words came to my mind, I'd sing the verse. But Peter was it was a dance in the crowd, and I sang the mixture of the two songs. And one says One Night of Sin, and one says One Night with You. So you put the sin and the you together, and you see what the song's becoming. So then after the song, Peter comes to me in all seriousness and said, John, I noticed that you used the words from both songs. I said, I did? He said, yeah, and he rhymed them up. And that's the first time I realized that he went in so much depth to look at songs and try and cross-reference them with everything else, as Steve talked about, the trickster version of it as well. So the other thing I'll point out is that Peter is, in another world, would be an absolutely outstanding world figure. When it comes to East African and African literature, there are few, very few, who are in the same arena as him. Unfortunately, history does its thing and sends you to another place where you may not be recognized easily. So, Peter, thank you for everything you've given us. You'll be remembered always. Once you write the story down, ain't going anywhere. So all of you out there who have stories, some of them have mentioned them to me today, write it. Thanks very much. Mary and the family, our sympathies are with you, but we know it was a life well lived, and it'll prevail forever, or immensely, as you pointed out earlier. Thanks very much.
When I think of my grandfather, the thing I think of most is his passion, not just for Elvis, but for really all music, all literature, and politics, and of course his family. We would often go on walks around our place. He would spend so much time every winter, every summer with us. And we would always go on walks, and something I always struggled with was, what am I going to talk about on these walks? And something my brother figured out very quickly is all you had to do is just bring up something that either he was passionate about or something that we were passionate about, and the conversation would just flow from there. He was not just a professor, but also a student throughout his entire life, a student of life, always listening and learning to everyone, their passions, their desires, and just always giving them advice and encouragement to be who they want to be and be their best selves. His passion for people and their voices is something that makes life worth living, and is what everyone just spends lives searching for, and something I hope I can find in my life, and I hope everyone has found in their lives.
I think it's an incredibly hard thing to really talk about Peter, because he was just such an incredible man. And I think my favorite thing listening to all these different speeches today is hearing about his stories in Iowa, because when he would come here to Mississauga, he was like a celebrity that would come here, and the whole family would just rush over to see him. You would hear that Peter and Mary were in town, and we would all get together and rush to see him. And it was, every time we would see him, it would be such an incredibly exciting thing, because he spoke, as everyone has said, he spoke with such passion, and it was so special. And I think that being his godchild was, it was a big deal to myself, because it came with a lot of pressure, And I remember being this little child and hearing about this great big writer, this writer, and he was one of the first people that, I don't think at the time in the 80s, he really knew a ton of what to do with children's literature. He didn't know a lot about children's literature, so he definitely gave me a book that was well beyond my years. He gave me a novel, and at the time, I think I was 6 years old, and I still remember that novel because I sat with it over and over, trying to understand what this novel was about, because I thought, if my Uncle Peter has given it to me, then there's something important in it. And I still remember that book. It's called Nobody in This Family is Ever Gonna Change. And it was all about the expectations set on Black youth in America. And I sat with that book over and over, learning to read it. And he was one of the many people that opened up literature for myself. Both my parents are huge readers. John and Cynthia Nazareth were huge readers. But he was one of the people that said, don't stick with where you are, as a child. Don't stick with where your level is. And in that way, when he gave me that novel, I think he was really pushing me to go beyond. And I know that that's probably what he's done for thousands of students. And that is such a special thing. And so when I became a teacher myself, I try to embody that. I really try to support my students in not staying where you are. Because just as Steve and I spoke about recently, novels will open up the whole world for you. So don't stick with what you know. And because of that, I think Peter really opened up the world for us in Mississauga in a totally different way. And so I'm so grateful to him and for every single way that he inspired us as young people here. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name's Derek, and I'm from Toronto. And my mom and Auntie Mary are sisters. So I was Uncle Peter's nephew. I first met him, I think, in Toronto when I was like 10 or 11. It's the time I really remember. They were staying with us for 4 or 5 days. And we had incredible conversations and took me to journeys all around the world in these conversations. One of the funny memories I remember is he was on this fitness kick. And the next day, I was determined to wake up with him and go jogging. And I put on my shorts and my t-shirt, and he was decked out. I think it was one of those full red 90s sweatsuits, the Adidas tracksuits or something like that. And he had a headband, a sweatband. So he was so committed when he did something. He jumped into it. And not only did we go jogging and I had to keep up with him, but he also brought these devices, like this thing that you pulled apart and this thing you twisted. These like incredible metal fitness devices, if you remember them from the 90s or 80s or whatever it was. And so he inspired me on so many levels, and I'm so convinced that I became a journalist, a TV producer, got involved in media because of him. He wasn't just this academic. You could have these incredible conversations with him, and you would laugh and be inspired. He could bring in music and art and cartoons, and he'd always have books for me to read. And I was a kid that loved to watch TV and escape into movies, so it forced me to read books. And the pressure was on when he was coming to visit because I had to read the books that he'd given me before. And then he'd bring another book that he'd mentioned the previous time. And I just remembered today that he was one of the first people who would sign in the book, hey, Derek. Normally people would write hi or dear. And so as that hey became more popular in social media, I would always think of Uncle Peter. He was this brilliant man who could connect and touch your heart, expose you to so many ideas and issues and layers. It was so powerful, and yet he was so positive and uplifting. He was a man of the people. Perhaps it was the time he spent in Iowa. Perhaps that hay was a Iowan affectation. But it was this most incredible, lighthearted connection to academia and ideas. He made it accessible, and it was truly powerful. I came here today because I really wanted to meet the relatives again, people I haven't seen in so long. And I was joking with some of the young guys, I've watched you grow up. I can't remember if I met you, but I've been at every event from all the photos. I feel like we've met. And they're young men now. It's so powerful. So, and I wanted to come and say to Randy and say hi to Randy and Patrick. You were like sons to him. And from what I saw, it was really powerful to have the impact and the support that you've had for him. There are moments where things were upside down, and I thought, should I go? We were all worried, and sometimes with the weather and the chaos. And we would hear, oh, Randy's gone. Or, he had 2 doctors looking out for him. So not just these great daughters, not just this incredible wife who, when I went through tough times, would always send me a card, my godmother, Auntie Mary, but these 2 incredible sons. And he spoke about how wonderful it was to have them early on. And I was so impressed by how he was able to have such a strong family. And so here you are today. Thank you for bringing this here for us. It's so beautiful that we can be part of this and celebrate a great man who touched our lives. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate everybody who came up and spoke, and we want to thank you all for taking the time to come and celebrate our dad. And it was just so wonderful to see all of you. And for those of you who traveled here, just for this, we want to thank you for coming.
I'm not sure if my mom wants to come up and just say something small to thank everybody.
I thank everyone who came today to celebrate Peter's life, and I am truly grateful for all the wonderful things you'll have said about him. I think we were both very fortunate. I have two beautiful daughters who helped me a lot and helped him, and two wonderful son-in-laws and three lovely grandsons. And I am very grateful, we are all very grateful to all the family who are here today and to everyone who have spoken. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. I cannot sit more.
So at this point, you can get up and chat, and I think we can stay here for. I don't have my watch. Hold on. I think we still have a little time, and I encourage everybody to just get up and mingle.